there's been eyewitness accounts of every culture that I've visited around this entire planet. And their eyewitness accounts of what they experienced is 100,000% opposite of what's in the Bible. People have...
Based on, what do you mean? Can you give me an example?
The Dogon tribe, for example, in Mali, Africa. They experienced a culture that they claim came to this planet from Sirius B. They have the evidence that they knew these beings were from Sirius B because they have the instruments that show the orbit of a trinary star system that we couldn't discover until the 1970s with our modern technology, okay? They understood not only the orbital pattern of Sirius A, B, and C, but even that B was a failed star, which you can't see it from Earth with the naked eye. They knew that it was a white dwarf. They even knew that they said that if you took a tablespoon of it, the entire tribe or 1,000 men couldn't lift the tablespoon. They understood mass and gravity as well. They were told the shape, the sizes, and the colors of all the planets in our solar system, which they recorded. And there's only one wisdom keeper, and that person can never be touched by a person. If they get touched by another person, they'd actually be killed. And then they eventually have a mentee that they break down that verbally handed down knowledge to. And that next person then takes over and becomes the wisdom keeper. And they've been doing this for thousands and thousands of years. And science, modern science, has found all their information to be 1,000% accurate.
This tribe believes all life comes from a distant dark star, invisible to the naked eye. Recently, modern science was able to find this star and confirm its existence. Now we must ask, how did a primitive people, lacking instruments of any kind, discover a dark star hidden deep in space? In Central Africa, among fortress-like cliffs on the southern edge of the Sahara Desert, live a people called the Dogon. 1,000 years ago, fleeing from warring tribes, the Dogon found refuge here. A circle within a circle depicts Saturn and its rings, which can only be seen with a telescope. A large circle and 4 satellites. The planet Jupiter and its moons. Most remarkable is this symbol. It represents the orbit of the Dogon star, a phenomenon deep in stellar space. Yet, no such orbiting star is visible from the Earth. It was not until this century that Western astronomers began to suspect its existence. A desert tribe called the Dogon, isolated in the African wilderness, may have identified a star invisible to the unaided eye. How is this possible? How could the Dogon possess this sophisticated astronomical information?
Then you have the Hopi tribe of the Americas, indigenous tribes, Hopi tribe, Lakota tribe, also having engagements with these quote-unquote star brothers, even having an account of them being taken underground, which you don't see just only in America. I just came back from Turkey. You have the people from Turkey in Mesopotamia also being taken underground into a place called Derinkuyu by these beings, by these people, a structure that's built 12 stories deep underground, that's made out of volcanic tuff, a very soft stone. And if you don't know what you're doing, it'll actually collapse. There's no evidence of any collapse. And it was thousands of years old. It was reused many times. So the mainstream story about what it was used for to hide from Romans is actually false. This place is ancient. And in order to build it, you actually have to have foreknowledge of how to construct this type of an underground civilization that can hold 20 to 30,000 people, places for livestock, places for worship, with no sign of collapse. And you have to have hundreds of ventilation shafts. And I've been down there. Those ventilation shafts cut through solid rock all the way down to the core. And there's even more. It links to other underground cities that are miles and miles away. As you get to the very base of this area, you can cut through and go to another location. But again, these people were taken under. Also, then you have the ancient Egyptians. Similar story. Major catastrophe comes. These people come and take them underground. Then you have the information in the Egyptian book of Going Forth by Day. More accounts by people, our ancestors, that have accounts that do not match up with the biblical text. And so all of a sudden we're saying that all these cultures, the Aboriginal people, I can go into them as well. I've sat I've gone for
Sure, sure.
walkabouts
Do you mind?
in Outback, in the Outback,
Yeah.
and the Aboriginal elders, same thing. They were seated here by Pleiadians. This is their verbal handed down history for thousands of years. And I can go around the world and I can come up with all this information from all these eyewitness accounts from people that should be respected, dignified, and shouldn't be scoffed. And that we're now saying that all this information that they put forward, all their verbal handed down history, all their written history, that's got to go to the side because this one text is 1,000% accurate.
Sure, but so my question is, most of that is oral history, correct?
Oh, it's all oral history, even the Bible.
Okay, so when we're engaging with oral history, what methodologies are you using to confirm that the orality is accurate?
Well, first and foremost, some of these texts some of these cultures have written down information in caves. You've got cave paintings. The Dogon tribe actually have not only written down.
Sure.
The symbol is explained. The knowledge preserved in rituals through the centuries has been confirmed. Beyond the Dogon knowledge of the dark star, the symbols reveal more information about the celestial universe. They correctly place the Earth and our solar system within the Milky Way and state correctly that the massive cluster of stars is far more distant than the planets. The understanding of astronomical movements led the Dogon to investigate the human anatomy. They discovered the circulation of blood in the body long before it was discovered by the English physician William Harvey in the 17th century. These symbols and the knowledge they hold are the legacy of the mysterious Numos, the messengers from the dark star. Many cultures claim their knowledge was given them by godlike beings descended from the heavens. But the Dogons insist their gods descended from one star in particular, which they're able to identify and describe in detail. Does other evidence exist of this encounter between gods and men?
No, I don't disagree with that. The question is one of historic. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there. The question is one of methodological analysis. So you have to have a method by which you can find either that something is falsifiable or that there are avenues by which you can show internal and external accuracy of credibility. So this is what we do with documents. This is what we do with the ancient gospels. This is what I do. I've worked on Xenophon and Plutarch, and we look at the internal evidences and the external multivalent corroboration to try to figure out, okay, yes, we have all these stories. Great. I don't deny that. But as a historian, as someone who's trying to figure out what is accurate, how do you know if I use the term verisimilitude, do you know what that term means?
No, but I can tell you this. Tell me how the Dogon tribe saw Sirius B, knew the orbit of Sirius B, a trinary star system, accurately, and can show you the orbit with a special tool that they made that was given to them by these people. How do they know the shapes, the sizes, the colors, and the orbital pattern of all these planets in our solar system and other star alignments that they would use to have something called the Ziggy and planet and their own harvesting and planting and so forth and so on? That's not enough evidence that there's something.
Well, I'm not aware of that particular case. And even, I would grant that, the ancient people are far more technological advanced than we give themselves credit for. Just because they're ancient doesn't mean they're stupid. I am well aware, as someone who has done both investigation of the past and done archaeological analysis, that is a reality. My question is simply, okay, you have these stories or you have these accounts, you're referring to them as eyewitness testimony. How are you going about verifying that as that?
Well, if the people had eyewitness testimony about Jesus, they then just wrote down their eyewitness testimony on a piece of paper or parchment paper or papyrus. So these people...
Right. So that's where internal methodological analysis...
Some of it's actually written down. So, it's the same exact thing. There's really no difference.
Well, no. So you do internal investigations to figure out when something was dated. So something like so when I use that term verisimilitude before, that's something we as historians are looking for. It's a term that simply means the appearance or likelihood of truthfulness. So when you do historical analysis, it's an inference to the best explanation. So you have proof and you have data, and you're extrapolating that data on levels of probability. So some things can be confirmed as high probabilistically true, and other things are lower in their probability that they happened. But there are different methodologies, different ways that you explore historically how that happens.
Well,
So for the
that
Gospels,
was,
look
that
at
was with the Dogon tribe. Scientists went there to visit the tribe, and they still have no answers because they used their modern science. They took the best scholars to visit these people, and they're still scratching their heads. Something happened there.
Sure.
For Western science to determine the orbit of the Dogon star required calculations based on decades of astronomical observations. Minute shifts in the position of the giant Sirius led astronomers to suspect the gravitational influence of an unseen companion. When computer studies of the data were complete, they verified that a small star orbited Sirius every 60 years, exactly as the Dogon claimed.
When you read Azazel coming down in the book of Enoch, coming down, and the first thing he does is teach people how to make knives and swords so they can cut a man's head off. You read, you see these quote unquote.
Where's that in the book of Enoch?
In the book of Enoch, Azazel. He comes down and he teaches.
Where is that in the book of Enoch?
Okay. And then you analyze the fact that these angels are having sex, they're getting drunk. These are just people.
Whoa. Where are angels getting drunk?
Angels party, they go, they hang out with people, they go to war with people, they put on their outfits and they go to war with people. This is
where are they getting drunk though?
They get married, okay, whatever that means. But they're having.
They don't get married.
Okay, not
in fact, Scripture says that angels can't get married.
But the point that I'm making here is when you start to really analyze what these angels are doing, and you start to analyze how many people are dying in the biblical text, you start to say, well, how many people did Satan actually kill? And when you start doing the tally on the numbers, God's doing most of the killing in the Bible. It's not the devil that's doing all the killing. And then God says in Isaiah, I created the good and I created the evil. Do what I say at the Lord. So he's saying that he's doing the good and the evil. That's what he's saying.
Yeah.
My personal opinion on this whole thing, I just let me get this out because we keep going over the same rhetoric over and over again. My personal opinion is that the biblical text is a good book. Like I've said, I've got videos. My number one video on Twitter has me saying this. It's good text because if you actually apply some of the information that's in the Bible, you can get a good result, like you have done, Mark.
Right. I struggle with no, I want you to finish your thought. Go ahead.
Yeah. So because you can get a good result, but there's a lot of misinformation in the Bible. There's a lot of false information that's copied from ancient text. And if you go by that text, all of a sudden you end up with 400 years of slavery. You end up with abuse. You end up with divide and conquer tactics that separate people. You end up with people thinking that they're the chosen ones and they're the chosen people. And we've been promised this promised land so we can eradicate another race of people because this is our land, because God promised it to us. You have people that want to go on the papal inquisitions and torture and kill and murder over 80 million people. You have the American Holocaust, 111 million indigenous natives slayed. You have all this going on because of this text, which is set up so contradictory throughout its path across time. You get into the New Testament, slavery is still being condoned in the New Testament.
Was it?
Honor thy slave master as you would honor God or Jesus, it says, I believe. So in Ephesians.
It doesn't. It doesn't say that. But
the God of the Old Testament too.
It did say, slaves, obey your earthly masters with respect and fear as sincerity of heart as you would obey Christ. That's slaves. Obey your earthly masters with respect and fear as you, with sincerity in your heart, just as you would obey Christ. So it does say that in Ephesians 6:5, but there's so many aspects.
That stuff is what.
And what is the context of what Ephesians is saying?
It
doesn't. It doesn't say that. So I think this is very important because we don't take text in isolation. So, well, hold on, because do you mind if I address the gospel of Jesus' wife?
Sure, go ahead.
Yes.
So the gospel of Jesus' wife doesn't actually mention. So oftentimes what happens is that the text of the gospel of Jesus' wife is kind of paralleled with the gospel of Philip, which mentions that that Jesus would kiss Mary Magdalene on the mouth. And so those are kind of used in parallel to kind of for this argument that Jesus was married. So the gospel of Jesus' wife is in the Harvard Library. However, the reason we know it's also not legitimate is because even though the manuscript, the papyrus that it's on was carbon dated to the 4th century. The text was actually copied from a PDF version of the Gospel of Thomas known as Grandin's Interlinear. And there was a mistake in the Coptic text of Grandin's Interlinear that was copied into the Gospel of Jesus' wife. So we know that this is not a legitimate document, even though the papyrus is ancient, and this happens a lot with forgeries. I have a couple of friends who have actually worked on projects that have revealed forgeries within Dead Sea Scroll manuscripts and within other ancient Christian papyri. But the reason why we know the Gospel of Jesus' wife, and that Karen King, who kind of vouched for it and she lost a lot of credibility, unfortunately, for her, and she's admitted that it's a fake as well, was because we can tie it directly to not copying from an ancient text, but actually copying from an online version of the Gospel of Thomas in a PDF form. And the mistake on that PDF form was copied into the text that was borrowed in the phraseology of Jesus' wife. So I just point that out is, once again, with our sourcing, I think we need to make sure that we're going towards not just early sources, but actually credible sources. And unfortunately, neither the Gospel of Barnabas nor the Gospel of Jesus' wife are credible sources in terms of actually, and agreed upon by not just the vast majority of scholarship, but I don't know anybody in the field of papyrology, paleography, historiography, who actually refers to these documents as being legitimate.
The next thing was about the Gospel of Jesus' wife. That question came up. So, what's the question? In podcasts, I have been noted as saying it's quite possible they discovered the Gospel of Jesus' wife. Fact. And then I go on to say, in maybe 3 podcasts, it's quite possible that Jesus never died, that he may have been married. And his Merovingian bloodline could still be on the planet till this very day. This the Gospel of Jesus' wife, this text has been examined, it's been looked at, it's been researched, it's been everything you could think of by dozens of academics from all over the world, and everyone's looking at this thing, and it's creating a big stir, and it's creating a big woo-ha in the whole Christian community, because it could potentially upturn the apple cart and everything else. But there's also some talk about it. Maybe this thing is real. Maybe it's not real. Maybe it's fake. Now, maybe it's not real. Does that even matter? The fact that in my podcast or podcasts that I've been in, I actually blatantly say that it could be that Jesus was married, and he may have had a wife and even had children. Now, why would I still have that opinion after people, academics, come out and try to say that this thing isn't real? Well, let me talk about that for a minute. Let me pull back up my PowerPoint. Hold on a second. Is it possible Karen King was explicitly pressured into stating that the Gospel of Jesus' wife was likely a forgery? It's possible to consider factors that may have influenced her acknowledgement of the fragment's questionable authenticity. Scholars, especially those in high-profile positions, can face significant academic, institutional, and public scrutiny, which might feel like pressure. And it could put pressure on them to some degree. So, what they're saying is, when people are doing these things, when people are, coming up with discoveries that could upturn the apple cart, it actually puts a lot of pressure on the Christian community, because they have this mainstream ideology that they don't want to bend or break because it's been in place for eons. And what kind of academic pressure can they put on you? Now, I'm going to go into some actual recent, or not recent, but fairly recent in my terms of understanding history and dates and times and geological timescales, evidence of this happening before. And I'm not saying this thing is 100% real. What I'm telling you is I'm giving you a different perspective, which is what I always do. Academic pressure. The academic community largely dismissed the fragment after critical analysis revealed it was likely a modern forgery. Reputable scholars published detailed examinations, and institutions emphasized rigorous standards, and this overwhelming consensus could have created a sense of academic obligation for King to align with the evidence. She was extremely gung-ho for a very long time and fought against saying it was fake. That's an absolute fact. She fought against it initially. After the story gained international attention, there was considerable media focus on King and her research. A lot of pressure. Investigators report reputable scholars publish detailed examination institutions, overwhelming. Okay, so then here it goes. The public scrutiny and media. After the story gained international attention, there was considerable media focus on her research. And investigative reports, such as the Atlantic's expose, further cast doubt on the papyrus. So an outside source came and said, no, we can't. They got pressured, and they came with the external pressure and said, no, we can't let this go out. This can't be known as accurate. This public spotlight might have added external pressure to respond transparently. Institutional and professional expectations. Harvard Divinity School and other academic institutions would naturally be cautious about potential reputational damage, and it's conceivable that indirect pressure arose from the need to maintain the integrity of these institutions. Sound familiar? NASA, making up lies about different things that they do. Yeah, they tell the truth in some things, but a lot of things they tell are obfuscated or lied about. And other organizations within government and everywhere else, especially when you're talking about anything doing with government and religion. Those two things are filled with the most lies and obfuscation and oppression. Personal integrity. King's acknowledgement that the evidence presses in the direction of forgery could also stem from her commitment to scholarly rigor rather than external coercion. So I'm also saying, hey, maybe she wasn't coerced, or maybe she was. Okay, so here we go. Emperor Constantine. The Council of Nicaea sought to establish doctrinal unity in Christianity, leading to significant decisions about the official biblical canon. Action taken. Certain texts, such as the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, and other apocryphal writings, were excluded from the Bible. So you mean to tell me people are relying on this one book for their eternity? They're trying to lock in eternity. They're trying to lock in everything so they can live forever in this magical heaven. And they don't have the whole story. The council favored texts that aligned with the proto-Orthodox views of the time, suppressing writings that presented alternative interpretations of Jesus' divinity or Christian theology. These decisions shaped the New Testament as we know it, but sidelined diverse early Christian perspectives. There's no hand of God here, just a bunch of contrived trash. You see? The suppression of the Wycliffe Bible, 14th century. John Wycliffe, an English theologian, translated the Bible into Middle English to make it accessible to lay people. Why? Because ain't nobody going to read that Latin, and nobody wants to read that garbage British. They want to read this thing where they can understand what the heck it's talking about. The Catholic Church declared Wycliffe a heretic and banned his translation. The church maintained that only Latin was the appropriate language for scripture, ensuring control, sound familiar to you? Control over biblical interpretations. The church feared that access to the Bible by common people, the commoners, might undermine clerical authority and foster dissenting interpretations. More manipulation, more contrived garbage. Sound familiar to you? They have a history of doing this. This is how they live. They live off of this garbage. These are their teachers. They're only doing what history has taught them to do in that genre, to lie, steal, and cheat, and buy fake bots and attack people's accounts and threaten kids. Wycliffe's efforts eventually inspired the Protestant Reformation, but during his time, his followers faced persecution and copies of his Bible were destroyed. Anytime a light bulb rises up, they smash that bulb, don't they? The Vatican's handling of the Dead Sea Scrolls, 20th century. Y'all getting this in the live chat? Y'all getting this? Y'all getting this? The Vatican's handling of the Dead Sea Scrolls, 20th century. The Dead Sea Scrolls discovered between 1947 and 1956 include some of the oldest biblical manuscripts and other Jewish texts from the Second Temple period. For decades, access to the scrolls was restricted to a select group of scholars, many affiliated with the Catholic Church, and this secrecy fueled allegations of suppression or selective dissemination of information. Selective dissemination of information. Selective dissemination of information. Sounds like a hook in a song. How to Be an Evil Dark Person. That's the name of the song, and that's the hook. Critics suggested that the Vatican might have limited access to avoid challenging traditional interpretations of biblical texts or revealing discrepancies between ancient manuscripts and modern Bibles. After decades of pressure, does that sound familiar to you? After decades of pressure, like the pressure defendant 1 was getting from defendant number 2 and defendant number 3, after decades of pressure, the scholars and public demand, the scrolls were fully released in the 1990s, revealing important information, stirring debates about historical biblical accuracy. Y'all getting this? Y'all getting this? These instances illustrate how institutional control over biblical texts has shaped religious and cultural narratives, often suppressing or altering content to align with dominant ideologies or maintain authority.